Good morning. Welcome to today's webinar. We're glad that you're here. This is the DBE Bidding and Contracting Updates Part 1 Overview. My name is Victoria Beal. I'm with the Ohio LTAP Center, and I will be the behind-the-scenes technical support for this webinar. A couple of quick housekeeping items for you before I turn things over to our presenters. First off, if you have questions throughout this webinar, please put them in the questions box, and I will make certain that they get read to our presenters. Also, there is a handout in the handouts section of the GoToWebinar panel for you to download. It's a copy of the slides from today. If you are not able to download it for whatever reason, we will be sending out a follow-up email with a link to that document and hopefully also a link to a recording of this presentation. That recording will only go out though if the software is successful in actually doing the recording. So in case it isn't, I'm glad you're here in person. And with that, please welcome our first presenter, Lynn Stevens.
All right. Thank you, Victoria. Hello, everyone. Lynn Stevens is my name. As Victoria mentioned, I am one of 3 administrators with ODOT's newly named Division of Small Business and External Workforce Development. And we've been here since about 2015. Lauren Purdy is our deputy director and has been from the beginning. We have 3 offices, just to give you a short overview. First is our Office of Small Business Services, led by Deborah Green, and they handle all things related to DBE and SBE certification, our DBE reporting requirements to the federal government. They set the goals for DBE and EDGE on our projects, and they handle good faith efforts that are submitted on our projects. We also have DBE supportive services available to all certified DBEs. It's technical assistance and supportive services that may be needed to help you do business with ODOT. And then on-the-job training as well falls under Deborah Green's office. Our second office is the Office of Contractor Compliance, led by KT LaPlace, and they handle all things related to prevailing wage, certified payroll, prompt payment, commercially useful function, Title VI of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, and Section 504 of the 1973 Rehabilitation Services Act. Finally, our Office of Outreach, where I reside as the administrator. We help small businesses as they are seeking to do business with ODOT, and we can be a resource for all things related to doing business with ODOT, but also doing business with the state of Ohio generally. We can help with business community resources, as well. And we hold lots and lots and lots of webinars, workshops, and events throughout the state where we inform small businesses how to do business with ODOT. And next slide, please. For our Office of Outreach, we have four
I didn't
outreach.
include that one, sorry.
Oh, okay, no problem. We have 4 outreach managers throughout the state. You may be very familiar with them. Michelle Newman in Northwest Ohio, Jennifer Christ in Northeast Ohio, and Tony Perry Gillespie, in Southwest Ohio, and Lorraine Stevens in Central and Southeast Ohio. So we're glad to go over this overview with you, and if you have any questions related to doing business with ODOT, we are more than happy to assist you. So with that, I'll turn it over to David. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lynn. Good morning, everyone. I'm David Walker. Good to be with you today. I am an accountability program manager here in the Office of Small Business Services in the Division of Small Business and External Workforce Development. So I just wanted to say hello, and I'm going to turn off my camera now so you can focus on the presentation for the rest of this session. So, but yes, this is DBE Bidding and Contracting Updates. We have a 3-part webinar. This is part 1, and this is where we're going to do I'm going to do the overview of all the changes that we've made to Proposal Notes 7 and 13, but also do just an overview of the entire process in case you are new to it. And so just the disclaimer that we're going with is that this webinar is for informational purposes only. And if I say anything or imply anything that may contradict anything on those proposal notes, just remember the proposal notes, those prevail. Those are the legal document. So, but keep that in mind. Hopefully nothing really will be contradicting them, but sometimes things happen. So our quick, just basic agenda, we'll just briefly touch on the DBE program updates at the federal level. Then we'll do that walkthrough of the DBE bidding and contracting process. What's changed will be in yellow. What hasn't will not be in yellow. So anything that's in yellow, that's something new and different. And so this is the status of the DBE program right now at the federal level. The program remains in effect. We have been watching since, I think, 2023, the Mid-America Milling Company versus US DOT case that's in the district court, Eastern District of Kentucky, where in a preliminary injunction against US DOT was granted in September 2024. We have at this point been required to remove the DBE contract goal from 39 projects in Ohio so far. But that said, we are continuing the program. We continue to do our certification and functions. We continue to do goal setting, and we continue to just expect that all of our requirements will be honored and fulfilled by the industry. And it appears the latest, there hasn't been any update for a while in this case, but the last thing was the plaintiffs and US DOT seemed to be interested in settling. So I think we can expect some type of changes to the program going forward, but we have no idea really what those will be at this point. So for now, we continue with the rules as they are. So why are we changing the DBE program now, or the DBE proposal notes now? Why are we changing? Those new DBE regulations they went in effect in May 2024, and we've been, along with all the other state DOTs, implementing them in our programs. In addition to those new regulations, this is an opportunity, we've taken this opportunity to improve our program management and outcomes, partially by collecting more accurate DBE utilization data, which you'll see more of, especially in the next webinar, where we talk about the next part of this, where we show our new DBE affirmation form, and then using available technology better. Again, that's using that we're using FormStack for the new DBE affirmation form. We're using OneSpan for electronic signatures on the form. It's going to be hopefully an improvement over the old Word document. So, but again, I mean, I think the main thing is that we've definitely needed to change and update our proposal notes to comply with the regulations. Which projects are affected by these changes? Now, this is important because we are not making any changes retroactively. Only projects with the latest versions of the proposal notes are affected. Those are the projects selling in the June 12th, 2025 letting or later. Those, I believe, were just advertised yesterday. And so any projects that are currently being constructed, anything that's currently, maybe you've got an assigned contract, but you haven't started yet, those projects are using the older versions of proposal notes, 7 and 13, and they are not going to be affected. So this is more, we're forward looking here. We wanted to get out there and get people aware as soon as possible. But those projects are selling in the June 12th letting. They won't even be starting construction for quite a bit after that, obviously. On local let side, we are not making the changes yet. We do intend to roll out these changes later. I can't say exactly when, but they have to go into the federal bid document template, and they just, as the locals don't do lettings like we do, so they will potentially, you'll have some projects that have the old proposal notes, some have the new. So just make sure that you're paying close attention. But for ODOT, certainly anything with the June 12th, 2025 letting or beyond is going to be the new notes. How do you search for a proposal? You go to digital paper. I have a clickable link here. Open the proposal and look for the proposal notes. And what's the date on them? Is it April 11th, 2025 or later? If yes, the project is affected by the updates. If no, it's not affected. So the overview. What do we mean by DBE bidding and contracting? This is how, if you're a certified DBE, you would get selected to work on a project, heavy highway construction through ODOT. If you're a bidder and hopefully become the prime, this is how you find the DBEs. Tell us who you're going to use them, pay them, and get credit. So,
David, there's a
yes,
question in the question box. Someone would like to know, what does settling mean or implied?
settling would mean that right now, so the plaintiffs, Mid-American Milling Company, and there's also Bagshaw Trucking, another co-plaintiff, they've sued USDOT to try to get changes made to the program. And it, in the previous administration, they were not interested in settling. This current administration may be interested in settling the case. So like saying basically not fighting it. So exactly what that really means, like the last real activity in the case was that they had requested a stay in the proceedings, and I don't think the judge has granted that stay, but there's just not been any activity recently. So, but
Thank you.
okay, you're welcome. So, how does the process start? Well, the potential bidders will see that they have a DBE contract goal on their contract. They need to obtain DBEs in order to meet that goal. The DBEs then send quotes to those bidders. Bidders let the DBEs know we're looking for participation. The DBEs then send quotes to say we're interested. Now, the new is that material supplier DBEs will also be sending the material supplier form. This form is there to help make sure the DBE credit is going to be calculated clearly and correctly. This is a new requirement with the new DBE final rule. If there is a DBE contract goal, now each bidder submits the DBE utilization plan in Ashdoor project bids and should be prepared to submit the new DBE affirmation forms and the GFE documentation if needed, and I'll get to that later, if they are the apparent low bidder. We only collect that from the apparent low bidder. Which projects have a DBE contract goal? You can go to our bidding documents website, pull that up here, and it shows you, here's the June 12th letting. You see that these certain projects have a DBE goal, some have an edge goal, previous lettings. And you can also click here. You don't have to go to digital paper, but this takes you right to it, and you can see the proposal and look at the proposal notes. You'll see that anything in the June 12th letting and beyond will have the new versions. This May 22nd letting and previous will have the old versions. But if you see DBE, there's a DBE in this column, there's a DBE contract goal. If there's no DBE, then there's either an edge goal or no goal. And now some of these are actually going to be SBE goals. We have our SBE pilot program that is actually using these proposal notes. Just they're going to be numbered 8 and 14 instead of 7 and 13, but they're basically going to be the same thing. So, but I want to save most of the SBE discussion for another time. How does a bidder meet a DBE contract goal? First, how much is the goal that you have to meet? Multiply the bid amount that you're going to be submitting by the DBE goal percentage to determine the amount that must be met. So if you're going to submit $1 million bid and the goal is 8%, then you have to get $80,000 of DBE participation. And we want you to enter valid DBEs on the utilization plan for at least that amount and submit that with the bid. I have valid highlighted because we are trying to make sure that the industry is aware that we've made it more clear in these proposal notes that we will be adjusting things if needed due to errors and making sure that the DBEs are actually going to be able to be used for the amount submitted. And hopefully that usually comes in with material supply, actually, where there's a lot of confusion about how much credit the DBE would get. So it's where the material supplier form should come in and help with that. Which firms can be used to meet the goal? On our website, you could click on Find Certified Firms. And you see we have our Ohio Unified DBE directory. Click on that.
You have
And
a second. There's another question.
okay, all right. And this is the directory. You could search by NAICS code, by descriptor, by county, a lot of different ways. But you can search view report, and it will bring up the DBEs that perform under that NAICS code. Okay, so I'm going to take the question.
Sure, they would like to know on the DBE goal, does this also include any alternatives?
So the DBE is based on the base goal. So, or either if there's a base goal listed or the lowest buildable project, the alternate set of alternates that would be the least costly, basically. And it's actually very important to, when you're submitting your, working on your DBE participation, how you're going to meet the goal, to not rely on an alternate being selected. So like if it's basically conditional work, because if that alternate is not selected and that's how you met the goal, that DBE to do that work, then you're going to be short. So you certainly can use a DBE on alternate work, but I would not recommend that you meet the goal with work that's only conditional. So hopefully that answered the question.
I'll let you know if they put anything further in the
Okay.
question box. Thank you.
All right. So yeah, so if the firm is listed, it's a certified DBE in Ohio, and it lists the NAICS codes that they have. Actually, in the case of when you're searching for a code, it only lists the one that you're searching for, but you can also look at their certificate and see how all the other codes they may have. And make sure they're certified in the activity or the NAICS code that corresponds with the activity that you are looking for. Ask us. Our contact information will be at the end if you're not sure about NAICS codes, if it's the correct NAICS code. But if the firm's not listed or if they don't have the right NAICS code, it won't count. If you want to see a little bit more information about the firm, certainly I would say reaching out and talking to them would be really good. But we also have our DBE capability statements, which also work for edge firms, and you can see those and get more information about our DBEs that way. So finding DBE participation, this is very important. Soliciting the interest of DBEs as early as possible. Don't wait until the end. Don't put this off. Sometimes it can be difficult. Attend matchmaking events if there are any that are relevant to the project. Be willing to subcontract. Don't be too particular on self-performing. If you're able to find a DBE that can do something that would be helpful, consider it. Negotiate with DBEs in good faith. Make sure that you're not being too particular about terms. Certainly that it's important to make sure that you definitely want to do a good job and do the work for ODOT well, but you want to have partners that you can count on. So negotiating with DBEs in good faith is important. This is when we hear a lot about, well, I couldn't find a DBE because they were more costly than non-DBEs. That's not really complete. You have to be reasonable. Sometimes a DBE may be a little bit more costly than a non-DBE, but not always.
There are a number of questions that have come in now for you
Okay,
when you're ready.
All right. Well, there's this section of the code, federal regulations, 49 CFR Part 26, appendix, or it's Part 4, lists the different methods that you can use. I will say that a lot of bidders get really good at finding DBEs, and they don't necessarily have to struggle as much. But if you're new, you may find it a little bit more just something that's different. So be ready for that. And then document. Don't just, a lot of people do, I would say the majority of the contractors do meet the goal, but if you can't, you want to be able to have all those notes and phone logs and things like that ready to go, so that if you have to submit the GFE documentation, you'll be ready. All right, so I'll take a question now.
Okay. This person would like to know, for clarification, if there are alternatives on a project, does the prime contractor need to meet the goal for the whole project, including the alternatives, or just the base goal?
Just the base goal.
Okay, I'm going to get to the next question. Does the list include DBE allowable work types?
Oh, well, let me make one other, yes, clarification. It's pre-award, it's the base goal. Now, if the contract is awarded on alternates, then the prime gets an opportunity to make changes to their DBE utilization plan. They do have to, bring up that participation if it goes up, but they don't have to do that pre-award. They have 5 days from the notification of the alternates to make those changes. But we are flexible with what those changes can be.
One more question. On past projects, we have been required to use DBE for material supply. Some of these DBE suppliers have failed to provide timely service, resulting in major loss of production and ultimately profit for the prime contractor. How can the prime contractor be protected from damages due to poor performance on the DBE's part?
Yeah. Well, nobody's requiring the prime contractor to use any particular type of DBE, so they can use DBE subcontractors, trucking firms, or suppliers, or service providers. But certainly material supply is something that is quite often used in terms of meeting a DBE goal. I would just recommend that the bidders and primes use the same types of contract terms that they would use with a non-DBE. And then if there's an issue with the DBE's participation, we have, and I'll get into this later, the request for consent to reduce / terminate the DBE commitment. And, we are willing to listen to reasonable requests to reduce those commitments if there's issues. And we also understand that we will always ask for that prime if there is a reduction in a DBE commitment to make good faith efforts to bring it back up to where it should be. But we also understand that cannot always happen. We just ask that you document your efforts or your reasoning. But again, just make sure you are protecting yourself, and I think we're not asking you to do anything regarding, once you've got a DBE, if there's any issue that you have to basically just suffer silently, I should say. I mean, we are here to help. We want to be able to talk to you about these issues. So if there's a DBE that you're working with and they're causing an issue, and you're not able to, after talking to them about it, you feel like you're not getting anywhere, then let us know.
David, one quick clarification question before you move on. This individual would like to know clarification on prior question. Does the DBE list include their pre-qualified work types?
The directory does not. There's another place that we have the ODOT pre-qualification lookup that you would also be able to use. But there's not a requirement that every subcontractor be pre-qualified. So, and a lot of DBEs are not pre-qualified. That doesn't necessarily mean that they don't do good work.
Thank you.
And there's also a walkway or a descriptors table, basically, that does show you how this is getting a little bit more complicated, but how some of the descriptors in the directory match up with those pre-qualification work types. But again, just because they may have that descriptor does not mean they are pre-qualified. So, all right, moving on. Does everything count towards the goal at 100%? So for subcontracting and consulting or specialty work, if the DBE self-performs all its work, then yes. But anything the DBE subs to a non-DBE does not count. If the DBE supplies materials that it does not install, then typically no. Materials, how are they counted? So if the DBE manufactures the material, that's 100% credit. If the DBE is a regular dealer in the material, that's 60% credit. I'll go over what that means in a little bit. If the DBE is a distributor of the material, this is new, then 40% credit is applied. Otherwise, it would just be basically commission only, sort of a more broker arrangement. And new is that transportation costs are counted at the same rate as the materials themselves. So the 40% may be definitely of interest to a lot of DBEs and bidders and primes. But regular dealer, so the regular dealer, what does that mean? It's a DBE that owns or leases and operates a building, something like where they keep inventory and regularly sell the materials needed for the contract. There's more to it, so see the proposal note 7 for complete details, but makes sense so far, right? If you're a regular dealer in something, you have a facility, you have inventory, and you sell this as part of your regular business. Now, to get credit as a regular dealer, 60% credit, you would either provide all the materials from inventory or at least 51% of the materials from inventory, with the remainder being of the general character as the materials provided from inventory. And I realize now this actually, This part should be yellow, at least 51% of the materials from inventory, with the remainder being of the general character. So I apologize for leaving that out, but that is new. The USDOT has really clarified that 51%, at least 51%. There's no drop shipping allowed. They have to be certified in the correct NAICS code, and that'll always begin with a 4. And just like any supplier, the DBE would have to comply with Office of Materials Management requirements. That's really not new. Now, for bulk or specialty, and this crossed out text is not a mistake, but I just wanted to explain that there's this variation on regular dealer DBE work where you may not have a building, you may not have an inventory, but you have that distribution equipment, like a truck, basically, and you have an employee that could be yourself, but that drives the truck. And you regularly sell the materials in question. The inventory thing, again, does not apply. Drop shipping doesn't apply, or drop shipping is not allowed, but you have the truck. You're delivering the materials. And again, as long as you're certified in the correct NAICS code, you comply with the OMM requirements, then you can be considered a regular dealer in the sort of bulk / specialty area. And the specialty, we don't expect that to be used too much, but that's basically where you are selling something that is not really practical to keep in inventory. And what is a bulk item? I don't have this on a slide, but things like basically need a special type of truck for, like a dump truck or like a flatbed, something that's bulky. Things like steel, brick. Well, not we use brick that much, but aggregate and asphalt and liquid fuel and things like that. So those would be bulk. Obviously, if you're talking about just something like things that are normally kept in inventory, that would not be considered bulk. So distributor. The distributor is one of the big changes with the proposal note 7. What is a distributor? They are DBE that also, like regular dealer, regularly sells the materials needed for the contract. But unlike a regular dealer, they don't necessarily need that building, inventory, or even a truck. There are requirements on how the transaction works. They have to take ownership of the materials from the point of origin to the destination. So we have, say, like a big, just a supply company, so we'll just say Heavy Highway Construction Supply Company Incorporated, and they are the ones that the DBE is getting the materials from. The DBE buys them from there, and they take ownership of the materials. They ship the materials using a third-party carrier unaffiliated with Heavy Highway Supply Incorporated, and they assume liability for any loss or damage not covered by their carrier's insurance. They can be getting that 40% credit for those materials. Well, actually, you would be getting 40% credit for those materials towards the DBE contract goal. Just like with regular dealers, they still have to be certified in the correct NAICS code, beginning with a 4, and comply with the OMM requirements. So this is a potentially new way of meeting DBE goals. Transportation costs, as I mentioned, they're now counted at the same rate as the materials themselves. So this is a little bit of math, and this is a common example, though. Say $100,000 of bulk materials were being purchased from a regular dealer plus $10,000 for hauling them. Under the old proposal note 7, you get 60% credit for the 100,000, and then full 100% credit for the 10,000 of hauling. So $70,000 potential credit towards the goal. With the new DBE regulation, it would be a little bit, and the new proposal note 7, it's a little bit less. You just add the entire amount together, and the whole thing counts at the 60%. That'd be like $66,000 of potential credit towards the goal. And if it was a distributor situation, it would be $44,000. So the DBE Material Supplier form, this is for DBEs to fill out, and we'll discuss this much more in part 3 of the webinar, but I can give you a little preview. It looks like this. It has a few required questions and then a lot of yes/no questions. And you go down the list and work through. It'll tell you exactly what you have to answer. And then on this page here, it'll tell you the amounts and the DBE credit that you would be getting, and adds it all up at the bottom. And this would be then submitted with that DBE Material Suppliers quote, so that the bidder / prime would know exactly how much credit they would potentially be getting. So that, again, that will be discussed much more detail in part 3. And it's we say must fill out. If they forget, it's not the end of the world. You'll need that before the bidder will need that form before they can complete the DBE affirmation form. So,
David,
yes.
we have another question. How will we know which DBE is qualified as a distributor or dealer at the time of bid?
That is what this material supplier form is for. And talking to them, and just because, there's not really necessarily a way that you can look this up, because it just depends on every DBE supplies they can supply many different types of material, and they may be able to do things in different ways. And so this form takes that into account, where they would, again, it's not just something to say, oh, just buy from me. Every time you do, it's going to be considered a regular dealer. Some DBEs actually may operate that way, but many others don't. So by filling out this form, the results here will appear in the proper boxes. The DBE would then put in, like, okay, if you buy materials A and B, they're going to be good for 60%. If you buy materials C and D, those would be good for 40% credit. If you buy materials E and F, those are just for broker credit. Material G, we manufacture, that's good for 100% credit. So you'll see all that, how this works out in our part 3 of our webinar. But that's part of the reason I think USDOT was interested in having states come up with questions like these and forms like these, because it's just been very difficult when we get a lot of issues with maybe DBEs don't understand how much credit they would be getting for the materials they'd be supplying, and by asking having the DBE answer the questions, having the form produce those results, it should eliminate a lot of that uncertainty. And we expect that we should be able to rely on if you use the form in good faith, be truthful with the questions, your answers to the questions. It should be nothing to worry about at the time of bid. We are working on a process to do more, I guess, due diligence on exactly what our DBE material suppliers are selling, but that is something that's still in the works.
There's a question that came in that's related to this topic. They would like to know, so in the past we needed to attach a signed quote from the DBE material supplier. So now they will need to send the supplier form when they fill out their portion of the affirmation form, ?
Well, we actually need, the form is going to produce a supplier code, and that code then gets, when you as the bidder get this form, you're going to be moving this code over to our affirmation form, and along with the amounts, is what we need. So you need the quote, so as the bidder needs the quote so you can see what's being bid, what's being quoted. Sorry, but as long as we don't necessarily need the quote, as long as we get a good description of what the materials are on the affirmation form.
There's another question related to that. They want to know what happens if the DBE supplies the form but incorrectly fills it out. For example, the DBE fills the form out as a regular dealer, but then ODOT determines the DBE is actually a distributor.
That, yeah, I do think that's potentially going to happen. But again, we are going to look at least at the beginning, that since this is new, having the DBE, as long as they're not being, let me say this, you should know a little bit about the DBE you're working with. So if they tell you they're just a broker, and then they fill out the form and say they're a regular dealer, you should be able to know that that's not true. And if we happen to know that that DBE is just a broker and they fill out that form saying they're a regular dealer, then we may potentially come back and say, look, we can't accept this. But if it's just an honest mistake, we can be a little bit more flexible with it, at least at the beginning here, and until we get our DBE Material Supplier list up and running. All right, so you've got your DBEs in mind. You've got your quotes, you've got the material supplier forms. If you're going to use material suppliers, you submit your utilization plan with the bid in Ashtore Project Bids. Those what you submit are your DBE commitments on that utilization plan. And if you are awarded the contract, you're committing to engage the specific DBEs listed for the amounts listed, which are minimums, to perform the specific activities described on those DBE affirmation forms, which you haven't submitted yet. So what's due after the bid opening? Again, this is before you submit your bid. With the bid, you submit the Ashtore Project bids information. After the bid opening, if you are the apparent low bidder, you would submit the DBE affirmation forms for those exact same DBEs listed on the utilization plan for at least the amounts listed, and GFE document. And it used to be that we would say they had to match. We've clarified that you can go above the utilization plan amounts, but they can't be below. The affirmation form amount cannot be below the utilization plan amount. And then GFE documentation if you didn't meet the goal. The new DBE affirmation forms will be demonstrated in part 2 of the webinar, but I can give you just a sneak preview. They're in form stack, and then it'll also be finished up in one-span sign. And it's a form that looks like this. I'm not going to go too far into it because we want to make sure we take our time in explaining how all this works, but pretty much a lot of the information that we were collecting, or all the information we were collecting, is going to be on here, plus a little bit more. All right. So when are the affirmation forms due? 5 days from the bid opening. These are calendar days, and we extend it to the next business day after any weekends, federal holidays, and other days ODOT may be closed. But you should submit them as early as possible even on the day of the bid opening, if possible. Why wait? If you submit early, it gives you time to make any corrections. What we don't like is we get affirmations they're due at 5 p.m. and they submit it at 4:30 and they are all messed up. So don't think that, oh yeah, 5 days, I'll just do other things and then come back to it the day they're due. Try to get them in as soon as possible, and then you can check that off your list. So GFE documentation, what does this mean? You don't have to absolutely meet the goal with your DBE utilization plan and affirmations. It's definitely not a requirement that you do that. But if you don't meet the goal, you have to submit the GFE documentation on how you tried to. So again, this is saying here, if the total DBE participation on the DBE utilization plan meets the DBE contract goal, and then we don't tell you any downward adjustments are needed, and you don't have to submit GFE documentation. But if downward adjustments are needed, such that the goal is no longer met, or if it wasn't met in the first place, the parent low bidder must submit GFE documentation to be considered responsive. And yeah, this is, as I was saying, if the total DB participation does not meet the DBE contract goal, ALB must submit GFE documentation to be considered responsive. Now, only the ALB has to submit the GFE documentation, but if you're, say, the second low, you should be prepared in case ODOT rejects the ALB's bid. If they didn't make a good faith effort, you'd be up next, basically. The form is on our website, and when is it due? 5 days from the bid opening. Okay, so downward adjustments to the DBE utilization plan. We've been doing this, but we wanted to make it clear in this proposal note that if the DBE supplier is not actually going to be considered a regular dealer, and you put them down for 60%, and they can't do it, then we may need to adjust downward. If the DBE will end up not actually self-performing all the activities listed on the form. Now, with the new affirmation form, hopefully that's going to be more evident that if they're not self-performing everything, you need to specify that, because that was often missed on the old form. If a DBE is not certified in the NAICS codes associated with the activities listed on the form, we can be potentially a little bit flexible to start with, but we do want people to be able to identify which NAICS codes go with which activities a DBE would be doing, and make sure they look in the directory and find that the DBE is certified in those correct codes. Sometimes the DBE is not certified in the right NAICS code because they've outgrown that code. So you cannot always just assume that any DBE can do anything. Any other information that we may need to use to determine that there was a miscalculation. Now, how often is this going to happen? We don't expect it to happen that often. It doesn't happen that often now, but we just want to make it clear that this could potentially happen, and GFEs would be needed. So again, all the more reason to get the affirmation forms in as quickly as possible once you find out you're the apparent low bidder. Now, we hate to do this, but ODOT may, we used to say shall or must, or will, I think. We said will. Now it's may reject a bid because of these reasons. So if you don't submit the affirmations on time within 5 p.m. the 5th day after the bid opening, it's a reason for a rejection. If the goal was not met, or goal attainment had to be adjusted downward, and the GFE documentation was not submitted 5 days from the bid opening, that could be a potential rejection. If the GFE documentation was submitted, but it does not show sufficient efforts were made, and we have a GFE committee that meets to discuss the GFEs, but that could be a potential reason for a rejection. If the DBE utilization plan is incomplete at bid time or not submitted at all, which I don't think that really happens usually, but that's a reason for a rejection. And then if the affirmations are not complete and accurate by the due date, that's a potential reason. Just make sure you are getting everything in on time and you should be fine, or at least, again, submit early so there's time to fix some of these issues if they happen. So,
David, we've got a
yes.
question.
All
We'd
right.
like to know if awarded alternates would result in a lower contract amount, can the DBE affirmation form be lower than the original utilization plan submitted?
Well, I'm not sure that I'm not sure there is an alternate. Like I've never heard of a situation like that where you award an alternate and it would lower, because it's, again, the base bid should be the base. That should be the lowest. So I mean, we'll have to consider it, but yeah, if there's some situation like that where somehow an alternate reduces it, then the total bid or total, yeah, the contractor's total contract amount would go down, and potentially that would mean that they could change up their DBE utilization plan to reflect that if they didn't need to use a DBE for as much.
Another question is they would like to confirm, is it 5th calendar day or 5th business day?
So it's calendar days, but then it's extended to the next day that we're open. So that means weekends count, but it's never going to, like, if the due date is a Saturday, Sunday, or a holiday, it would extend to the next day that we're open.
Last
That's the
question.
definition of day from the regulation, so we have to follow that.
Okay. Last question for the moment. Who determines if a bid may or shall be rejected? And is there certain criteria that is followed to come up with that determination?
Mhm. Well, we have an awards committee, and basically that's made up of the deputy director of construction and a few other people in construction, and that's generally who makes that decision ultimately. We can recommend, but and it's it's not, again, we want to work with, we don't want to just be like super strict. Um, we This happens now. Like, we are not completely super strict about, like, oh, it came in at 5:01 p.m. You're late. You're out. It just Now, if you don't submit your bid like on time, you may not even open your bid. But this is just a little bit different. The DBE program is, we recognize that it's asking quite a bit of the industry to do some of these requirements. So we are willing to be a little bit flexible where we can be. So that's why we changed this from shall to may, because, just to be honest with you, we're not always rejecting a bid because of some of these issues.
Thanks for the clarification. That's the last question for now.
All right. So you are the awarded contractor. Congratulations. From us, you will receive a post-award DBE commitment status checkup email. Hopefully, if you already are receiving those, you are replying to them. But again, please reply to them. If you're not getting them, let me know. But they should be going out to whoever we have is listed as the contact person in Ashtor Project. But they would say, just to confirm, these are your commitments. These are the DBEs you're going to be using in the amounts and the work that's going to be performed, or the activity. Please just reply to make sure that it's all looks good. You'll receive checkup emails when the project is paid at certain amounts, 25, 50, 75, and 90%. And these emails are there to help you remember those commitments and make sure that you're on track to meet them. So please reply and let us know. I mean, just all you have to do is, if everything looks good, check the boxes and say, yep, those still look good. You'll also receive one when the project is 100% paid. We don't have any reply on that one, but that's basically that one should let you know if you've fully honored your commitments or not. And we do hope that you do. We expect that you do. So again, a lot of people are very good at replying to these emails, and some we have not heard from. So possibly they're going to people's spam or junk. I don't know, but that would be just something. If you're currently working on ODOT contracts, please check that you are getting those. The summary of payment records and DBE commitments. This is a report on the CMS portal. It's a very useful tool for you that you should be very familiar with, hopefully by now. Making sure that all the payments that you've entered in Signet to your subs are showing up and the amounts are correct. DBE goal attainment information is correct. The percent honored is correct. So again, this is the CMS portal. My view is different from yours probably because I'm internal to ODOT, but you would go to like contractor reports and you would click on the summary of payment records and DBE commitments, and then you'd put in a project number, and you can filter by if there's too many payments. Sometimes these can be pages and pages, so you can reduce the length of the report that way if you want to. But let me see here. I'm just going to pick a contract, and just as it shows you here, this contractor has been paid. It's a $4.1 million, $4.2 million contract. It's a 10% DBE contract goal, and it's just underway, so they haven't reached that much attainment yet. But the attainment is based on the actual amounts verified as received, not the amount paid, but the amount verified. So it shows you if there's any unverified payments. And then the DBE commitments are listed down here, the NAICS codes, the work, and the commitment amounts. And actually, there's no issues with unverified payments on these DBEs, so that's good. These will show up, by the way, with big red boxes if the amount verified does not match the amount paid. And then the commitment percent honor at the end of the project, these should be 100%. And if there's a supply transaction, if it's a supplier DBE, then the commitment amount is going to be the 60% or 40% or whatever, and then the supply transaction amount here is going to reflect the total that you're going to have to pay in order to get to that 60% amount. So, and then up here it just lists all of your subs, DBE and non-DBE, and there's information about withholding. So it's a lot of information, but it's hopefully pretty useful.
Couple questions.
Sure.
First one wants to know if a prime contractor relies on a DBE supplier's form, but it is filled out incorrectly, is this automatically a GFE? Or will the prime contractor be required to add additional DBEs, which may be more expensive and have not been included in the bid?
Well, like I said, we're going to have to take this on a case-by-case basis because we know this is new. I think that it's somewhat important. It is very important, I should say, for the bidder to understand the capability of the DBE. Certainly if they're not certified with one of those codes that begins with 4, other than the broker code, and then they say, oh yeah, I can be a regular dealer for that, and they put that down, and the prime accepts it. And I mean, we would kind of question as to, okay, did you really look at the details of the situation here? And because I think by now most of the industry should be really well aware of the need to be able to perform like a commercially useful function as a regular dealer without just being a broker on things. So, but if it's just like kind of sort of an innocent mistake, we'd be more willing to work with the DBE and the prime, the bidder, on that. So I can't really, I don't want to just say, oh, instant rejection if this happens. We want to work with people. We're not looking for ways to just like say reject, but it just depends on, I think, the nature of it. If it's like an egregiously wrong thing, it's like somebody saying I can be a manufacturer, but I'm really just a broker. That may not be something that we can necessarily overlook. But so I'm sorry I can't be more specific or like concrete.
Next question. At what point should reduction forms be submitted to ODOT? How
Okay,
do you, yep,
we're
and then
getting to
how
that.
do you,
Yeah.
okay. Say the rest of the question is, how do you handle DBE amounts when ODOT non-performs entire line items from a project?
Yeah, we're getting to that next. So yes.
Perfect, thanks.
So well, in a few slides. So, but great question. Yeah. So non-payment. I just wanted to bring this up. This is something that we've always had in PN13, and it's just so important to make sure your entire team is aware of what you've committed to DBEs, because absent ODOT's consent, you, as the awarded contractor, are not entitled to any payment for work or material unless it is performed by or supplied by the specific DBE indicated on approved DBE affirmation forms. And this applies even if you have like a clean record, no sanctions, no DBE related sanctions. And this is, again, it's a federal regulation. It's part of what we have to do, but it can be a tough one sometimes when we have to do this. We don't like doing this again, but um, if you self-perform work you had committed to a DBE, please just don't do that. We may not be able to pay. We may not pay for that work if you do self-perform that, or if you reassign work from a DBE to a non-DBE, or even if you reassign work from one DBE to another. Those commitments are very once those are entered, those are very much set. So as much as we want to be flexible with, talking about other things, the commitments are really more not something we can be flexible with. However, there are ways to change them if you follow the process, which is that last question that we received. So a couple more slides and we're going to get to that topic. When you're the awarded contractor, we have to review and approve all DBE subagreements for goal. For even if they're suppliers or service providers, just anything that's a DBE subagreement for goal, we have to review and approve those. The C92s will not be approved unless we have approved those subagreements, and the DBE must not begin work or supply material without an approved subagreement in C92. And we always are, we work diligently to get those approved as quickly as possible. I'll say that. There are the twin goal attainment objectives: to attain the contract goal and to fully honor the DBE commitments. I hear a lot, oh, well, yeah, that DBE commitment, we didn't use them, but we're still going to meet the goal or attain the goal. Well, you really have to do both. It's very important. It's part of the program. We have made a change, though, in how we consider whether you've attained the DBE contract goal or not, because we now have what is called the PN13 contract amount. This is, again, so if you have the new version of PN13, we're not going to just include the current contract amount anymore. That may be appearing in other reports. We have a special amount just for DBE contract goal attainment purposes, where we're excluding the 8,000 line items and any 9,000 line items that are negative. So like incentive payments, price adjustments, deducts, we're going to exclude those. So This actually would be probably, I'm thinking, in the most part, a good thing for most primes, because if you get an incentive payment, that in the past has meant that you're going to have to meet the DBE or attain the DBE goal based on that higher contract amount. And it's not actually adding any work to the contract. It's just an incentive payment, or price adjustment, same thing. So this is, I think, makes it fairer for the prime. And again, we're not talking about changing if any work. If it's a non-performance, that's different. That's still going to be reducing the contract amount. But so attain the DBE contract goal and fully honor the commitments. Now, document. I'm saying it again because it's so important to honor those commitments. Changes that happen at the beginning of a project may impact DBEs that haven't even started yet. And if like a mile of the project gets lopped off, will you be able to fully honor your commitments? Raise the RPMs, landscaping at the end of the project? Probably not. So keep a journal of any changes to the project, how they might impact those commitments, and how you might plan to remedy the potential shortfall. Because if you don't meet the goal at the end of the project, you have to submit GFEs. All right, so the question that we got, how can you make changes to your commitments? We have the request for consent to terminate / reduce a DBE commitment form. And all changes except those caused by ODOT, which is in yellow because that's new, must be consented to by our division, small business and small business and external workforce development, in advance of the change being made. And that's in bold because in advance is very important. The DBE gets an opportunity to object on that form. Hopefully many of you are familiar with this form already because we've had it in use for quite a while now. But don't fire a DBE or remove them or whatever and then ask us for consent to terminate them, because you've done it already. What are we consenting to? We want to make sure that before that commitment is terminated, there's good cause. And that's what the form is for. If you've done it already, we can't tell you. And then don't self-perform those activities. You may have committed to a DBE without asking for our consent. I mean, you can if there's a valid reason. The DBE saying, we just can't do it. We've overcommitted ourselves. That could be a valid reason, but it's not going to be valid if you don't ask for consent and get that consent first. So,
Is a question when you have a moment.
well, I guess, yeah, I mean, I have to go through the good cause reasons, but again, in yellow, it's that if it's caused by ODOT, you don't have to fill out this form anymore. So if it's a non-performance, so that should actually reduce the amount of paperwork. But yes, I'm ready for the question.
Someone would like to know, what are 8,000 and 9,000 items?
Again, yeah, those would be those incentive payments, price adjustments, deducts. They don't represent actual changes in the quantities of work being performed.
Thank you.
All right. So good cause. The reasons for a good cause are pretty much the same as they've always been. The DBE just doesn't want to sign the contract with you. It could be good cause as long as your contract is reasonable. The DBE is not performing the activities listed on the form in a way consistent with normal industry standards. But we do ask for a little bit of help understanding what the industry standards are that are not being met. That's new. So bonding, DBE becomes bankrupt, ineligible through suspension and debarment proceedings, DBE is not responsible. Voluntary withdrawal, that's something that sometimes we see, and if you say, well, we asked the DBE to withdraw, that's not really a voluntary withdrawal. So that's, don't do that. But if the DBE does become ineligible to receive credit, for that work. So they had been when you put them on the commitment, but then they became ineligible, then you could potentially reduce or terminate that DBE. Basically, I would say the majority probably of our potential proposed reasons for reductions or terminations or other documented good cause, because sometimes they just don't fall into one of these other 9 reasons. But whatever it is, just make sure that you're asking for it in advance and timely too. Don't wait until the end of the project, or don't wait more than a couple of weeks. Just keep track of what's happening with your project, and make sure that as soon as you find out that you can't fully honor those commitments, make sure you let us know. Now, not good cause, we decided we could save time by self-performing it. No, I mean, it may be honorable, but you've got to use those DBEs. Save money, well, but the DBE that you committed to is going to be left in the cold. So, and then, mistakes, we understand mistakes can happen, but generally those are not going to be considered good cause if you self-perform by mistake. But if ODOT non-performs the DBE's work, don't submit the request for consent form. This is a big change. And just keep in mind, if you're still using the old proposal notes, if those old proposal notes are in your contract, then you still have to do the same process. But if for the new proposal notes 7 and 13, you just have to send an email to the DBE and CC this email address, same one that you used to submit the affirmations, saying what happened, and we will adjust the commitment downward. We may verify it, of course, with the project staff, but we want to just try to make this as easy as possible for all the parties. So that's something to look forward to with the new proposal notes.
David,
Yes.
one more question just came in about the 9,000 items. They said 9,000 items also include change orders and force accounts, adding work and value to the project. Many of these items do not include potential to utilize a DBE. Will these 9,000 items also be excluded from the final goal value?
Well, we're only excluding 9,000 line items that are negative at this point. So unfortunately, no, we would still be including like force account work.
Thank you.
But that's something we can always reconsider for a future revision. Okay, if a DBE gets decertified, that's where we are now. So as it's been, if a DBE is decertified before they sign their contract with you, the DBE will not count, and you'll be expected to replace them, or at least make good faith efforts to replace them. If a DBE signs the contract with you and then gets decertified, they will count, unless, and this is the change with the new DBE final rule, the DBE merged with or was acquired by a non-DBE, in which case only the amount paid for the work performed prior to the decertification will count. So, and it's just something to keep in mind. Some DBE, hopefully, if you're a DBE and you're planning on merging with a non-DBE, it'd be wise to make sure that you're letting people know that before accepting a whole bunch of work, and then potentially leaving those primes scrambling to replace that participation. So if it looks like you will not attain the goal, now I talked about documenting things so much, but if you find it unlikely that you will attain the DBE contract goal, you have to really be, continuing to look for additional participation, or start if you haven't been, but don't wait. Again, going back to like those early changes to a project. We often hear, well, Yep, the raised pavement markers were non-performed, and that's why we didn't meet the goal. And by the time we found out that was going to happen, it was too late to replace that DBE, do anything else. So we didn't. But I mean, did you really possibly know that the raised pavement markers weren't going to be performed earlier? Most likely, yes. Because all the other work that was non-performed that went with that. So, we have good faith efforts for contractors form. Just don't submit it until the end of the project, but that's where you can document your good faith efforts. Sanctions, prime contractors are subject to sanctions. Again, we also hate to do that, but failure to pay a DBE the dollar amount this is new. Failure to pay a DBE the dollar amount for the performance of the commitment, basically. You can go over a commitment, that's no problem, but it's very important, again, the twin objectives, attain the goal and fully honor the commitments. So if you have a commitment for a DBE and it looks like you're not going to be able to meet it, you have to take action. Otherwise, you're subject to sanction. Not saying that you will be, but you're subject to it. And then, so failure to submit those change orders, which would just be, we're not talking about like formal change orders, but just those emails that say, hey, there's been a non-performance, or there's going to be a non-performance, and we're not going to be able to use you for as much anymore. So this is the new amount we're going to use you for. Failure to submit if it's not an issue that's a change order, like a non-performance, if you actually have to submit the full request for consent to terminate/reduce form, then that would be another. If you don't submit that and you don't honor or fully honor the commitments, then you could be subject to sanction there. And currently we also do the inadequate GFE documentation as well as a reason for sanction. We are almost finished. I do want to try something out with you all, or have you try this actually, because I don't want us to have to do a lot of troubleshooting with one span at the end. So the new DBE affirmation form is in FormStack. That's a web-based form, and anybody can use that. OneSpan is also web-based, but it works by sending emails. And sometimes those emails go to people's junk or spam. And if you've already been receiving OneSpan's emails for whatever reason, you don't need to do this. But I would like everybody to go to this website, and I guess I may have to put this in the chat because I don't know if you can click this. Oops.
I think that would be great. If you just drop it in the chat to me, I'll ship it over to everybody. And while you're doing that, we do have additional questions that have come in. So let me know when you're ready for those.
Okay. All right. I gave it to you, Victoria, in the chat.
Thanks, David. Are you ready for a question?
Well, let's just do
end?
this real quick, so
Okay.
we can. Yeah, we're almost done.
That's
So
great.
just an email test. Just trying to make sure that you actually get this email. You put in your, information here, and say submit. First name, last name, and email is all you need. Submit. Everybody should get this. Just make sure you get that email. Check your email. Make sure you get that. You don't have to do anything beyond that.
The link is in the chat for everyone now.
Okay. If you didn't receive the email, check your junk and spam folders, filters, quarantines. Move it to your inbox. Then when you get the email, click the Go to Documents button. Just make sure that works. But that's it. That's it, really. I mean, you don't need to sign anything. So, but I just wanted to make sure that you because there are sometimes times where people are not getting the emails. But actually, so yeah, upcoming webinars, they are May 8th and May 14th, part 2 and part 3. Part 2 would be the new DBE affirmation form, and part 3, the new DBE Material Supplier form. And especially, so the part 2 is especially for the bidders, the primes, but it would be also good for anybody to watch. And part 3 is also, it's the DBE is filling out that form, but it would also be good for anybody to see how that process goes. So with that, we're at the question portion.
Okay, first question. What if the contractor doesn't get a change order in or paid for force account after project work is completed?
What if the contractor doesn't gets a change order after the work is completed?
Yeah, if that doesn't quite make cohesive sense, maybe they can resubmit the question because it was a bit fragmented when I was reading through it. We can move to the next question and wait for them to resubmit that one.
Okay.
Next question. If ODOT non-performs the items the DBE was to perform, does that change or reduce our requirement to meet the overall DBE goal percent?
No. You still have to meet the overall DBE, the DBE contract goal, but it's just it's a reason you can, you do need to let us know that there was a non-performance and that DBE that may be affected, or multiple DBEs may be affected, what their new amounts are going to be, and then we'll adjust the system accordingly. But then it's up to you to work to make those, mid-project GFEs and document everything. Document, document, document.
Next question. What types of sanctions are the prime contractors subject to?
Okay, so the sanctions, the sanctions have not changed. They are starting with a letter of reprimand and going from there. I mean, we've actually really never gone beyond the letter of reprimand, but well, we don't necessarily even have to do the letter. Depending on the nature of it, we can sometimes just do like a letter saying, hey, we just don't do that again. But and one thing that I did want to point out was that the letters of reprimand actually they now roll off after 3 years. That was so that they just don't sit out there forever. But beyond the letters of reprimand, there would be potentially damages equivalent to the DBE shortfall, and then if there's a pattern of paying damages multiple times, we can pursue suspension, revocation, and or debarment. But like I say, we pretty much have only done the letter of reprimand. Obviously, pre-award, it's not really sanctions as much as just having the bid rejected. And then the other thing is when you self-perform the DB's work without consent, that you can be subject to having to not be paid for that work, even if you don't have any other prior record of sanctions.
We do not have any other questions at the moment, so we'll give another couple of seconds for anyone who might be typing to submit, especially the person who we asked to clarify their question. And also know that for those of you who I've told that David and his team will be following up directly, I will be providing them that information when we wrap things up today. So,
Okay. So
David, nothing else has come in.
all right, here's our contact information though. So if you don't have it already, you can have it. And I'll just mention in terms of getting that question might have asked like if a change order comes in very late, like after the construction work is all complete. We think that Okay. Sorry, I got a little sound hiccup there, but we think that obviously that there's been a change. So you don't have to wait for the formal change order to submit saying that, hey, we're not going to use that DBE anymore. So we're not going to we know that sometimes the districts are very delayed in getting those in. So as soon as possible.
Well, I want to thank everybody for being on the webinar today. We will send out a follow-up email with a link to the recording if it was successful, definitely to the PDF of today's slides, and also links to the 2 upcoming webinars in case you haven't registered yet and are interested. So, David, thank you so much for all your time today. We really appreciate it.
No problem, and thanks everyone for being here. I hope this was helpful,
All right.
and
We
have a
hope to
good
see
day.
you. Yep.
Oh
Hope to
yeah, I
see you
hope
on
to see you
the
at the next
webinar.
ones. All
Yes.
right.
Have a good day, everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.